Hello everybody, welcome back to Let's Play Hyper Light Drifter. I'm Bacter, and last time, if you will recall, we took on the first two robot bosses of the southern area. We arrived to the ruined shell of an ancient family of some description, hanging out up there. We've got two bosses to go in the southern area, and that'll be everything. It's, of course, as always, good to look for secrets, so here we find another monolith. Again, we're on track to be getting all of the keys and monoliths in the game in this southern area, so we'll have all of the benefits that accrues. It's kind of sad if you see how little cool guy's little robo buddy sticks with him there, even after his untimely passing. So we've unlocked one of the closed staircases here. I don't think you can hit those little hoverbots no matter how quickly you run after them. Also, this is just a little preview of what we missed by not jumping onto the platform from last time. The one that we closed off by going forward too soon. It's just a little bit here, a little bite. Yeah, nothing too major. It's the only real place in the game, like I said, that it kind of locks you out of a little, a secret like this and making you redo a dungeon to get it. So they do a really good job otherwise of that. It's kind of interesting that one remained here in the final southern area, but, so it goes. It's not a particularly long dungeon, so it's not over onerous or anything like that. It's just, so it goes. Anyway. We were, of course, very close to the exit there, so I think I'm just going to leave the rest of that in. See the robo assembly line here. It's interesting because those are not our most common enemies by any stretch of the imagination. So you wonder if there used to be, churning out robots by the dozen, and whatever cataclysm there was earlier stopped it. I mean, the assembly lines are clearly not active anymore, so maybe the robots we're fighting are the remnants of some ancient army. Makes you wonder a bit about the imps and the like too. Maybe those guys were created as sort of biological weapons for the ancient catastrophe, cataclysm, war, whatever was going on there. And their means of assembly were destroyed in whatever tumultuous thing there was. We're still not clear quite on the sides. If the robots were on the same side as the Titans, it certainly seems like they would have been. But if that's true, then they would have seemed like the invaders. We're not sure who would have lived down here originally. Check that cool speeder. Except for maybe the lizard men, but then, if so, then they've lost all traces of their culture. They don't seem to really know what they're doing. They got a glowy rock on a stick and they're exploring the ruins, and that's about it. We're just kind of doing a lap right now of the desert area. We're showing you everything that's out there. Like I said, there's a few angles of attack that you can take, and a couple closed off passages to us still. So those are ones we'll have to get to eventually. This is sort of the other major way in. And interesting, seeing a lot more of those test tubes, whatever those are. I was wondering if the little green guys were going to come out of them, but they don't seem to have, but they sure are slurping around here in detail, so that does make you wonder if, indeed, they were meant to be grown in vats down here. The only place that those turrets can really shine is in narrow walkways, for obvious reasons. Lateral movement tends to confound them fairly easily. It's interesting that they have just a little series of alcoves with minor challenges down here, next to a fairly major fight. As I said before, grenades are really good use on these robo guys. And there you see how quick that melee attack is. They really will beat you on the draw, even if you very quickly wind up your next big swipe. So let's this time with a bit more feeling, or whatever. You can dash past it, as with almost anything in the game. Not much will confound a fully powered up dash. Obviously, you'll still get hit by projectile shots if you're dash past projectiles, if your special meter is drained. And hey, yet another monolith. Still no clue who that hollow librarian is. Shows up there. Obviously, there is one other kind of area after this where we'll fight the final big boss. I'd say that is a spoiler, but I'm pretty sure. Before we go to the right there, let's finish clearing out the rest of this area. I'd say that is a spoiler, but I'm fairly clear, having probably played a video game yourself at some point in the past. You're familiar with the general defeat the sub areas and then the final. Yeah, it's Mega Man style, I guess. Is there a game that did that before Mega Man? I bet there was. You know, I bet it was Itachi no Kawari or whatever, and it was the Adventures of a Magical Dancing Grape. That seems to be how these things go. Just not quick on the draw with that wind-up shot these days. We're gonna have enough outfits. I need to start changing them soon. I don't end up doing that in this video, but very soon that will be happening. You see more of those sort of what normally would be secret parts. What's going on here? Interesting. People skeletonized inside of these engines or whatever they are. They kind of look like power generators to me, maybe. Or CPUs, I guess. Look, they're right underneath those wavy flags. Really interesting symbolism or construction or whatever you want to call it down here. I mean, as before, unless we're dealing with some sort of hyper-accelerated plant growth, it's been a while since anything was really going on down here. Being the last area, as I mentioned before, they're, again, not particularly shy about flooding you with enemies. You really need to keep mobile, you know, deal with threats decisively one at a time. At least that's how it works for me. It doesn't work well to just kind of pick at all of the enemies, because then you'll end up swarmed by a whole mob of them or something. Seems like a shame to die right next to a med kit. Although it's certainly not the only one we've seen like that. And again, they've got the containers of the sort of generalized ammo explosive things that you can get there. That was a dumb death. So what do you say we redo that? Kindly, they kind of let you start over pretty much right where you left off. When I was playing New Game Plus, I finally understood the frustration some people have had with save games, because there are some areas where you just die a couple times. But by this point in the game, even if you're not a particularly good player, such as me, odds are good, I think, that you won't take more than 1 or 2 tries to any individual area. That's just the way it goes. I did complete the boss rush. I forget if I mentioned that before, but I was very gratified to see that that was an excellent, I think, addition to the kind of gameplay that they want to have in here. Frequently in an area flooded with enemies, if they don't just flat out close off progression until you beat the enemies, they'll do something like that, where there's a really, really slow switch, basically saying, yeah, if you can get enough time to activate the thing while there's still enemies, then they'll let you across. Now you see, it's always good to look at ledges and such like that. This particular underground area is really just, it's quite massive, and again, there's multiple ways we could have gone. I mean, we still have, you know, if we had gone right initially in this area, there was a whole other thing down there that we're neglecting and that we'll have to get back to at a certain point in time, but you can just go a huge direction either way. And again, something about having that after they've sort of held your hand through a lot of the game makes it feel quite different. Some kind of altar there, maybe? Or again, some shielding mechanism, a power source or something they were trying to cling to. It seems like a lot of the skeletons were sort of after something when they died. They'll either be surrounding a major module, or I don't know, they'll be around health pack or something where you can, it sort of seems like they were fighting over some resource, which I guess would be expected if there was a big war. You know, you'd be trying to secure important things, whatever the major modules did for the people during the war. We're not entirely sure what they're doing now, other than they're presumably related somehow to curing the sickness. So maybe, in the same way that the crystal sickness was used to defend off the robots for some people, maybe the black sickness, the black cough that we have, sort of was what came after the war for others, for for drifters and people like us. Yeah. Anyway, this is me deciding to go to the right and just see what was over there before we advance any farther down, just because it's a shorter area. So, like I said, it was a big area, and if we head right first, and rather than backtrack that entire way and just have that all on video, this is what I decided to show. So. It's helpful to always poke around, even if you don't necessarily see a secret sign right away. Even though that was just a little health pack, those things are valuable. Sometimes you'll see that little... Your buddy will let you know something's going on over there. Kind of wasting a lot of ammo here, but it's, better than having to run right into an explosive barrel. Those do a lot of damage. I'm sure this is true of Dark Souls, which again I haven't played all the way through. But it is really interesting to me how you can start off feeling so weak. I remember at the beginning of the game I just felt so fragile, like anything could do me in. And then by the end, once you get the controls down, feeling very, very powerful in comparison to the rest of the creatures. Like, they had the advantage over me in that they do a lot of damage and I'm just one sort of fragile speedster. But then I had, if you can manage them properly, there isn't too much that you can't handle. And just tactile, from a tactile sense, the drift never gets old. And through that. I don't know if at this point in the story I had given up on finding a neat gift-wrapped conclusion for the thing. Either way, to avoid spoilers, I'm not going to talk about what happens at the end, but I don't think I did expect the ending of this game, which was pleasant. I think at this point, it's interesting, right? Because you've got your motivation, you the player, and then you've got your character's motivation, which is still, all I can really put together is we want to find some cure for our black lung disease or whatever it is we've got. That's as close to motivation as I can come up with. My motivation as a player, of course, was just exploration. And it's interesting because that means as the character should be getting more excited because we're presumably making some kind of progress. Those big modules do something towards curing the disease, and who knows how Dog's involved with that, if at all. I, the player, was getting more of a sense of almost dread, I guess, because I knew that one way or another the journey was going to be coming to an end and there would be no more to explore. And we'd just have to face whatever we did. Whether there in fact was a way to cure the sickness for everybody or just for ourselves, or if anybody else even has it. I don't think we've seen, besides Cool Guy, anybody else really suffering from it. His family, of course, all died. No indication that we had any. Which sort of makes me think that we don't. But, there aren't any like graves we get sick of or anything like that. Speaking of graves that people can get sad over, that was a thing in a game I recently played. I don't know how many of you have heard of Owlboy, the game that just came out, which had been in development for apparently a really, really long time. It's very good. I would recommend getting it. Much like Hyper Light Drifter, in fact. It's a beautiful game. The mechanics are a little hard to pick up at first, but once you get them down, you're going to feel very effectual. And the story has a couple of interesting beats in it and stuff like that. Incidentally, in these big rooms, my fraps sometimes throws up a little bit, so I apologize for that. Well, here we go. Was that a drifter in a big test tube? Because it kind of looked like one to me. So, are we just like vat grown out of these things. I'm pretty sure this down here, incidentally, is a reference to another game, which I am personally excited for. I think it's called Eden First Contact or something like that. Return to Eden First Contact, about a plant that escapes, an alien plant, and sort of marauds over the base, doing various things. I think that's what this is a reference to. It's another Kickstarter game, I'm reasonably sure. Either that or I've just seen about it in development, and if it is Kickstarter, it's obviously too late to back the project. But I wish I had, if it was a Kickstarter thing. Yeah, that looks like one of us in the test tube, so that's odd. Maybe we're just the final form of the incomplete goblins or something like that. Or maybe we're the real owners of this southern area, you know? Maybe, I don't know. Or, of course, maybe that's like a medical stasis tube or something. Again, I try not to discuss this too much before we actually get to the world review that I do at the end, but that is an interesting test tube. We certainly don't seem to, again, I say we don't seem to recognize any of this, but it's hard to say what we do and don't recognize. We certainly don't make any emotion like we do. And look, there we go. You see drifters being grown alongside imps, so it's not maybe quite like we're the final form or something, or we're just grown alongside them by either, you know, either we grow ourselves, as that's how we propagate, or there's some race that decided to grow both of us for some reason. Are we fighting our brothers? They don't seem like our brothers, they just seem like big jerks. But maybe they needed programming, you know, otherwise their base instincts would take over or something like that. That'd be a little macabre if we had to fight the remnants of our army or something like that. So it's an interesting theory anyway. Leave me alone. I'll do stuff here. Fortunately, that also lowered the turrets. Never get sick of grenades. All of the gun upgrades are worth it. It's just you need ammo to be convenient while you're moving around. And hey, there we go. Only 2 of those suckers to go. And then we'll be tackling the final challenge. Well, the penultimate challenge, I guess. Yeah, look at this. Just a whole bunch of us and imps. Are those hybrids of the 2 of us sort of floating there in the middle? Is that like a drifter imp hybrid? Sort of looks like it. Super weird. So maybe we were kidnapped for experimentation? Is that how they came up with those big gross jumper guys? That would be weird. Anyway. I'm sorry if you're our long-lost cousin or whatever. Apparently they just kind of stack the test tubes around for storage or whatever. They don't need to be cryo-frozen. Or maybe it's just really cold in here. I think you can trick them into jumping off the edge here, although it's a bit hard. I think their AI is a little better than normally jumping to their deaths. But I think you can maybe like stand near the edge and just kind of knock them off when they get close or something like that. Enemies will melee attack you even if there's a destructible terrain in the way. They're savvy enough to do that. That looks like a boss door, and it looks like whatever we did opened up this path down here. Yeah, we are pretty much rich with doubloons at this point. We'll go back and buy everything we can at some point. We don't need to quite just yet. Alright. So, this is probably the second hardest one, I think. Archer. Shooting with guns is good. they've got a trick here in a minute where they're going to drop those, and those are mines. They just chase after you. The trick with them is, if I do it here, if you shoot a grenade at him, it just destroys all the mines. And so the trick with this guy is supposed to be he starts restricting your movement because you can't get around all those mines everywhere. Just like that, and boom, boom. Double shot kills you, even if you're doing so good as you saw that he was very near to death. He's a fun fight, and again, I guess I didn't grenade it there, but the grenade is the secret to him. Otherwise, he just doesn't do enough damage to really be a huge threat. And he doesn't have a strong means of pushing you away if you get close, which means, as with a couple of the other of these robot guys, yes, there you go. As with a couple of the other robot guys, getting close is a real good strategy. And down he goes. Second try was way better, because I did that grenade trick, among other things. So there we go. A nice illustration of how knowing somebody's trick can either make it easier or harder for you. Bloodstains aplenty down here, so whatever happened, it wasn't good. Maybe, hopefully it wasn't the lizard guys when they woke up. We know they woke up the robots. Hopefully they were able to get out in time. Uh-oh. Yeah, I guess we should have figured it was, we were gonna be getting a whoa. Yep. That is a giant beating robo heart, is what that is. I don't think you can do anything to it. Oh man, look at that. This must be Titan assembly line, so the peepers were Titan peepers. Must be what they were. It kind of looks like he's got an umbilical cord on him there. And he's, you know, half formed, so in the giant machinery of this place, this is where the Titans were assembled, which is kind of cool. And hey, look at that. Beating that guy. I don't know if the game thinks that he's the hardest robot boss, because he's not. I'll tell you that, at least for my money. The next robot boss, until you learn his trick, is by far the hardest. But anyway, we don't even have to fight him if we don't want to, because we've raised this pillar. And having raised it, now all of the areas which were marked, you had to beat the southern area to get into, are free. And we can head north and tackle Bug Ugly if we want to. Whoever Bug Ugly is. It may or may not have been teased throughout the game. Just checking for secrets, as is my wont. It's like I see that path over there, and I was just so sure there was some way to get to it, but nah, don't worry about it. Not every path is gettable to. Alright, well, that was 3 out of the 4. And we're pretty sure we know where 4 out of the 4 is. This is the leftmost bit. It's like if you go south, straight from when you came in here. This is where we were going to go to before I did that backtrack and showed off the rightmost path earlier. This is kind of an interesting section, just because it's a lot of these basic guys with rifles and then a lot of platform jumping, and by this point in time you have enough tools that it isn't really super hard to deal with. I guess if you were going for like a no upgrades run or something, which again is real dumb, then it could have been rough. There's a couple achievements that are theoretically there for the game, which just no thanks. Like there's one for never dying. I'm pretty sure there's a speedrun one, but never dying is, that would be, I'm sure somebody out there has done it, and congratulations to you, but my goodness. Alright, I recognize this, because I fought the guy here a lot of the time. Okay, his thing is, he dashes towards you, and attacks you like that, and then waits and does a big wind-up spin like that. And his trick is, as he's dashing towards you, you actually have time to do a big wind-up swing and then dash away immediately, and he won't hit you. He always delays for a half second before swinging his side. And once you know that, he's really not bad. Otherwise, it's crazy how hard he is if you don't know that trick. And I remembered it from the first time I played when I fought him, so I know that seemed like it wasn't a really hard fight, but if you don't recognize that he has that particular opening for that particular move, he becomes much, much harder. Because if you approach him after he's planted himself after those dashes, he just brushes you away. And if you try to attack him at other times, like his scythe will throw and track after you and hit you that way. And he's the major example, in my opinion, of hey, it's the papers, of how knowing your trick makes fight easy. Because again, that was kind of a cakewalk. And that's all the bosses. That's the southern area bosses. That is every boss in the game, but the final one, which is awesome. We've got a little bit more to do, just in terms of cleanup. We've got some areas we haven't gotten to yet, so we'll tackle that next time. We'll do the final challenge in the southern area, and then we will beat the game. So thanks, everybody. I will see you